Ukraine is fighting a war right now with tanks that span 6 decades of design and war philosophy. From Cold War relics that Soviet engineers drew up before man walked on the moon, to the most advanced battle machines ever built. Some of these tanks are death traps. Some are works of engineering genius. And a few have secrets that even most defense analysts don't fully appreciate. Today we're covering every tank Ukraine is fielding. 11. T-72. Let's start at the bottom. Not because the T-72 is a bad tank in an abstract theoretical sense. When it first rolled off the production line in Nizhny Tagil in 1973, it was a shock to Western intelligence. Fast, low profile, capable of firing on the move. The CIA reportedly panicked. But that was 1973. The base model T-72s Ukraine inherited from Soviet stockpiles, the ones with no upgrades, no modern ERA packages, no thermal imaging, are fighting a 21st century war with 1970s eyes. In the dark, they are essentially blind. Their fire control systems cannot reliably detect a target beyond 800 meters in low-light conditions, while the tanks hunting them can identify heat signatures from well over 2 kilometers. But here's the detail that doesn't get discussed enough: the ammunition. Inside a T-72, rounds are stacked in a carousel autoloader below the turret. 22 shells arranged in a ring, surrounded by propellant charges, sitting just beneath where the crew works, eats, and breathes. When a modern anti-tank round punches through the armor and hits that carousel, the propellant doesn't just catch fire, it detonates almost simultaneously. The turret, a 10-ton steel dome, gets blown straight up into the air. Ukrainian and Russian soldiers have nicknamed this phenomenon the Jack-in-the-Box. You can find photographs online. They don't look real. And then there's the reverse gear. The base T-72 can reverse at approximately 4 kilometers per hour, a brisk walking pace. In a modern engagement, if you need to retreat, 4 kilometers per hour is not a speed, it's a sentence. These tanks aren't being scrapped because they're useless. They're being used because Ukraine needed every vehicle it could get, but on this list, they sit at the bottom for a reason. 10. T-64BV. The T-64 has a peculiar place in history. It was the tank that Soviet engineers considered so advanced, so classified, that for years they refused to export it. Not to Warsaw Pact allies, not to anyone. While T-72s were shipped to Syria, Iraq, and Libya, the T-64 stayed home. And the reason for that secrecy was the composite armor in its turret. The T-64BV variant added Contact 1 ERA, explosive reactive armor. Small boxes of explosive bolted to the hull and turret designed to prematurely detonate incoming shaped charges before they could burn through the main armor. In 1985, when the BV was introduced, that was cutting edge. Here's what they don't tell you in most tank documentaries. Contact 1 was specifically designed to defeat first-generation shaped charge warheads. It works reasonably well against those. But modern tandem warhead missiles, weapons like the American Javelin or the Russian 9M133 Kornet, were engineered specifically to defeat single-layer ERA. They fire a small precursor charge to trigger the ERA box, then the main warhead hits a fraction of a second later through the still-hot gap left behind. Contact 1 has no answer for that. It was never designed to. Add to this an analog fire control system without true hunter-killer capability, meaning the commander and gunner cannot independently track separate targets, and you have a tank that requires exceptional crew coordination just to perform tasks that modern Western tanks do automatically. The T-64BV is still being fielded because Ukraine has them, but it is visibly overmatched against anything equipped with modern optics and tandem warheads. 9. T-64BM Bulat. Now we get to something interesting. The T-64BM Bulat is Ukraine's own answer to the question, what do you do when you have an aging tank platform and limited money? The answer, developed over the 1990s and 2000s by the Kharkiv-Morozov Machine Building Design Bureau, Ukraine's own tank engineering house, was to upgrade aggressively within constraints. The Bulat received a new 850 horsepower engine, a significant jump from the original 700 horsepower unit. But the centerpiece of the upgrade was a new armor system called Noj, which translates from Ukrainian simply as knife. Noj is not standard ERA. It doesn't just sit there waiting to be hit. Ukrainian engineers claimed it could defeat weapons that defeat conventional ERA. The problem is that Noj was designed for the T-64's turret geometry, and that turret geometry is old. You can bolt modern explosive armor onto a rounded 1960s turret, but you cannot change the underlying physics of how shaped armor deflects kinetic energy penetrators. More critically, the T-64's hull is cramped. Critically cramped. Soviet tank design philosophy was rooted in the idea that smaller tanks present smaller targets, so crew height was effectively capped, traditionally cited at 5 feet 8 inches maximum for comfortable operation. The Bulat is Ukraine's most ambitious indigenous tank. It is also proof that even good engineering cannot fully overcome a fundamentally limited starting point. 8. T-80BV/T-80U. If the T-64 was the tank the Soviets kept secret, the T-80 was the tank they were truly proud of. And for one very specific reason. It doesn't have a diesel engine. The T-80 runs on a gas turbine, the same basic propulsion concept as a jet aircraft. The GTD-1000 turbine produces 1,000 horsepower and allows the T-80 to accelerate to highway speeds in a way that leaves diesel-powered tanks looking pedestrian. In winter conditions, a gas turbine starts instantly, no preheating required. The T-80 burns roughly twice as much fuel as a comparable diesel tank. In Ukraine right now, fuel supply lines are under constant pressure from drone strikes. A tank that burns fuel at twice the rate of alternatives is a logistical liability in this specific war. And then there's the ammunition carousel again. Same fundamental design flaw as the T-72. Contact 1 ERA on the BV variant. The jack-in-the-box problem does not go away because the engine is faster. The T-80 is a fascinating machine. It would have been spectacular in the rapid armored thrust across the North German plain that Soviet doctrine envisioned. Full speed, plenty of fuel supplied from massive pre-positioned logistics depots. That war never happened. The war that did happen punishes everything the T-80 was designed around. 7. Captured Russian armor, T-72B3 and T-90M. Ukraine has captured enough Russian armor, including the T-72B3 and, in rarer instances, the T-90M Prorv, that these vehicles have been documented operating under Ukrainian colors with Ukrainian crews. The aggressor's own best weapons turned around and fired back. The T-72B3, Russia's most widely fielded current variant, is a genuine upgrade over the base model. It has the Sosna U thermal imaging sight, a legitimately capable system that allows nighttime engagement, a more powerful engine, and Contact 5 ERA, which is genuinely better against kinetic penetrators than the Contact 1 on older models. The T-90M, Russia's most advanced production tank, adds the relict ERA system, which is more sophisticated still, and an improved fire control suite. So why are these ranked 7th, below some older Western tanks? 3 reasons. First, neither vehicle has blowout panels. The ammunition carousel design remains. A penetrating hit can still trigger catastrophic detonation. Second, reverse speed. The T-72B3 reverses at roughly 4 to 5 kilometers per hour. The T-90M, slightly faster but still dramatically inferior to Western designs. In modern armored combat, the ability to rapidly reverse behind cover is not optional. It is survival. Third, digital integration. Ukraine operates with NATO standard battle management systems, encrypted radio, digital mapping, shared targeting data. Russian tanks were built for a fundamentally different command architecture. Operating captured Russian equipment within a NATO standard network requires workarounds and adaptations that create friction in the middle of a firefight. They are valuable, they are capable, but they are not fully compatible with the force they've joined. 6. M1A1 Abrams. When the United States announced it would send M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine in early 2023, and then a quieter conversation began among people who actually study tank specifications for a living. Which M1? The M1 Abrams has been continuously evolved since entering service in 1980. The version Ukraine received, the M1A1, is specifically the variant from which the depleted uranium armor package was removed. This is worth explaining because most people don't know what depleted uranium armor actually is. It's not a coating. It's not bolted on. It's a dense mesh of uranium-238, a byproduct of nuclear enrichment. When a kinetic penetrator strikes it, the uranium doesn't just resist, it self-sharpens as it deforms, becoming more effective at defeating the incoming round the harder it's hit. The Abrams fitted with this armor is measurably more survivable against modern threats than the one without it. The M1A1s sent to Ukraine lack this. The U.S. government cited proliferation concerns, valid concerns, given the battlefield reality that tanks can be captured or disabled and examined. Additionally, the M1A1 lacks the Commander's Independent Thermal Viewer, the CITV, which allows the tank commander and gunner to simultaneously track 2 separate targets. In the M1A2 and later variants, the commander can be scanning for the next threat while the gunner engages the current one. In the M1A1, they share a single sight picture. That is a meaningful limitation in the multi-threat environments of modern armored combat. The M1A1 is still an excellent tank. Its 120mm M256 smoothbore gun is lethal. Its crew compartment is entirely separated from the ammunition bustle by armored bulkheads with blowout panels. If the ammo detonates, it vents upward and outward, away from the crew. That alone makes it safer than any Soviet-designed vehicle on this list. But it is not the Abrams that American tank crews take to war. And that distinction matters. 5. T-90A/T-90M ProRiv. The T-90M ProRiv, breakthrough, is the tank Russia calls its most advanced. And in the context of Soviet-derived design philosophy, that claim is essentially accurate. The relict ERA system fitted to the ProRiv is a third-generation reactive armor designed to partially defeat tandem warhead missiles, the weapons specifically engineered to beat second-generation ERA like Contact 5. Relict uses multiple layers of explosive elements and is angled to disrupt the penetrating jet across a wider spread. Independent testing by various defense analysis organizations suggests it offers meaningful, though not complete, protection against weapons like the Cornet. The fire control system in the T-90M is a substantial improvement over earlier Russian designs, with a genuine thermal imaging channel for the gunner and improved ballistic computation. Crew ergonomics remain cramped by Western standards, but the working environment is better than the T-64 or base T-72. Here is what separates this tank from everything above it on the list, and what keeps it below everything that follows. Crew's survivability remains fundamentally compromised by the carousel autoloader and the absence of any mechanism to isolate ammunition from crew space in a penetrating hit scenario. Russia has invested enormous effort in making the T-90M harder to penetrate. It has invested comparatively little in what happens to the crew if penetration occurs anyway. Western tank design made a different choice, and from rank 4 upward, that choice defines everything. 4. PT-91. Twardy. Poland has been one of Ukraine's most committed supporters since February 2022, and the tank Poland sent is one that almost nobody in the Western press examined carefully enough. The PT-91 Twardy, Hardy in Polish, began life as a licensed T-72 production program in the 1980s. But Polish engineers, who had full access to Soviet technology but considerably more latitude than Soviet designers, spent the following decade turning it into something genuinely different. The most significant development was Irawa, Polish-developed ERA, that is, by design specification, superior to Contact 5 in its multi-hit capability. Irawa modules are engineered to retain some residual protection even after initial activation, which standard Soviet ERA typically cannot do. But the deepest advantage of the PT-91 is its fire control system. The OBRA laser warning receiver alerts the crew when they've been painted by a targeting laser, giving precious seconds to take evasive action or deploy smoke. The digital fire control computer is calibrated for NATO standard ammunition, and critically, the entire system is designed with interoperability in mind. When a PT-91 joins a Ukrainian combined arms formation using NATO standard battle management systems, it integrates, it communicates, it shares targeting data. That is not a small thing. In modern combined arms warfare, a tank that cannot talk to the network around it is fighting with one hand tied. The T-72 hull is still there underneath. The carousel is still there. But the brain and the eyes of this tank are categorically different from what the Soviets sent to Warsaw. 3. M1A2 Abrams. Everything the M1A1 almost is, the M1A2 actually delivers. The commander's independent thermal viewer, the CITV, gives the M1A2 what tank professionals call hunter-killer capability. The commander scans continuously through a fully independent thermal sight, identifies targets, and hands them off to the gunner's system automatically. While the gunner is firing, the commander is already indexing the next threat. No other crew member needs to prompt this. The tank does it. On a modern battlefield where multiple threats emerge simultaneously, drones overhead, ATGMs from one flank, direct tank fire from another, the ability to process threats faster than the enemy is not a luxury. It is the margin between survival and a burning hulk. The SEPV-2 and SEPV-3 upgrades added the depleted uranium armor package, and, in the SEPV-3, an auxiliary power unit that allows the tank to run its sensors and communications while the main engine is off, dramatically reducing thermal and acoustic signature during static observation. The blowout panels in the ammunition bustle remain. The crew compartment remains fully separated from the ammunition. In the history of M1 Abrams combat operations across Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, and documented engagements in Ukraine, crew fatalities from ammunition detonation have been extraordinarily rare compared to equivalent Soviet design incidents. Not perfect, but very, very difficult to kill. 2. Challenger 2. Britain's Challenger 2 holds a record that no other tank in the world can claim, and most people who discuss tanks have never heard it. In over 4,000 combat sorties in Iraq during Operation Telic in 2003, not a single Challenger 2 crew member was killed by enemy fire. One tank was struck by a Challenger 2 in a friendly fire incident and destroyed. Every other Challenger 2 that took fire, including direct RPG hits, IED strikes, and ATGM engagements, survived with its crew intact. The reason is Dorchester armor, the second-generation evolution of the original Chobham composite developed at the British Army's Chobham Research Establishment in Surrey. What is confirmed through combat experience is that it works. The main gun is a 120mm L30A1, rifled, not smoothbore like virtually every other modern tank. British gunners using HESH, high explosive squash head, rounds can engage targets at ranges where the projectile's flight path would introduce too much dispersion in a smoothbore. At extreme distances, the Challenger 2 is arguably the most accurate large-caliber tank gun in existence. The limitation is ammunition commonality. Every other NATO tank on this list fires 120mm smoothbore rounds that are mutually compatible. The Challenger 2 cannot. This is a genuine logistical complication in a coalition environment, and it's the primary reason it sits at number 2 rather than competing directly with the top of this list. But as a pure weapon system, the Challenger 2 is extraordinary. The Ukrainians received a relatively small number. Every crew that operates one knows they are driving something almost uniquely resistant to dying. 1. Leopard 2, A6/2, A7, and Stridsvagn 122. At the top of this list sit two names that are technically different vehicles, but are, in practical terms, expressions of the same philosophy refined to its peak: the German Leopard 2 A6 and A7, and the Swedish Stridsvagn 122. Most people have heard of the Leopard 2. Far fewer have heard of the Stridsvagn 122, which is arguably the most capable tank variant in this entire conflict, and the least discussed. Sweden ordered the Strv 122 in the 1990s as a customized Leopard 2 A5 built specifically for Swedish requirements. The Swedish military demanded additional protection. The Strv 122 received a reinforced roof armor package, specifically to defeat top attack munitions, enhanced belly protection against mines, and a battle management system that was ahead of what standard Leopard 2 variants carried at the time. Rheinmetall engineers worked alongside Swedish defense contractors, and the result was a tank that exceeds even the standard Leopard 2 A6 in survivability. Both vehicles carry the Rheinmetall 120mm L55 smoothbore gun, 3 meters longer than the L44 fitted to the M1 Abrams. That additional barrel length is not cosmetic. It provides the propellant gases more time to accelerate the penetrating dart, increasing muzzle velocity by several hundred meters per second, which translates directly into armor penetration at extended range. The Leopard 2 A6 can reliably defeat any known production tank armor at ranges where that tank cannot effectively return fire. The fire control system provides genuine hunter-killer capability. The composite armor in the turret, the specific matrix of which remains classified by Germany, but has been analyzed through captured variants, and the mechanical reliability. This is underappreciated in any discussion of the Leopard 2. Produced a tank with a power pack, engine, and transmission that can be field replaced in under an hour by a trained crew with standard tools. Battlefield tank availability is not just about how hard a tank is to kill. It's about how quickly a damaged or broken down tank returns to service. Ukraine received Leopard 2 A6s from Germany and several other European contributors, and Strv-122s from Sweden. The crews that train on them describe a step change in capability, not incremental improvement, but a categorically different experience of what a tank can do. The Leopard 2 A6 and the Stridsvagn 122 represent what happens when a nation builds a tank without compromise. They sit, without serious competition, at the top of this list.
If you liked this video, I'm sure you'll like this one too. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Our channel is small, so we are replying every comment below. Comment any suggestion for future videos. Thanks for watching.